This is our ongoing series for the Guild, for individuals of the Guild, to help shed some light on what we mean by conscious leadership. And given that the Guild is respectful of those who do not want it defined for the Guild or by the Guild, there are also those who look forward to sharing their personal journey and their experience with what we mean by conscious leadership. And today in this series, we have with us Dr. Shadrick Mazaza, and his focus will be on conscious self-evolution, the foundation for conscious leadership development. So having had multiple conversations and the pleasure of being with Shadrick in many ways, I'm still learning about his journey. And I'm still grasping the nuance and the sophistication of how he both applies it in his personal life and in his role as an academic and a leader in business and in healthcare. So as a founder of a Institute for Conscious Leadership in Africa, and having implications for us as well on an international level, I know that we're all eager to listen and participate today. So without further ado, Dr. Mazaza, Shadrick, if you could guide us on your own journey.
Thanks, Kim, and hello to everyone. When you asked me to, if I would consider doing this, first thing that came to mind was, what else is there to be said? I looked back that at the beginning, Lewis virtually pulled me in to say things, and I talked, and then I was asked to say something again at another point. And so it feels as if I've already said what my journey was. But I think there might still be one or two areas that I would like to focus on today, with your permission. The way I intend to do this is obviously tell stories about my journey, because I think that's what Pathways is about, is to say how you got here, what happened to you. And so I'm going to say something about that, share those stories. But I'll focus, hopefully, on expanding a little bit more on consciousness and personal transformation that I teach at the business school. Looking at, is it spiritual, or is it something else? So I would like to say something about that, and what it means to, with the way I do it, what I mean by conscious leadership. So that's one thing. And the other thing is I would like to engage mainly on what I think are two things that I've come across, which someone said there are two things that if you get those, if you understand these two things, your life will change. Whether you're looking for spiritual growth or anything else, creativity, entrepreneurship, etc., and your personal life in terms of whether you are stressed in your life or not, depends on these two things, which I hope we can have a conversation on at the end. I've touched on these before, but maybe this is the time to engage them a little bit more. And the two things are really that they're, first of all, you need to know and understand who you truly are as opposed to who you think you are. That's the first. The second, understand where human experience comes from. Understand where your experience is coming from, because you can think of any problem that human beings will say, I've got a problem with this or that. What they mean is they're not having a good experience, okay? And so understanding how experience is created helps to reduce the, nastiness of bad experiences that we normally do have. So I'm hoping that we can sort of end with those two in the talk. Let me begin this by a little story. I'll be telling stories, but I thought this one may be a very good one to start with when you're talking about consciousness. A few weeks ago, I was having a Zoom call with someone who has been in the past a member of the guild. So she said, Shadrick, before we start, tell me what altered state of consciousness you've had, and I'll tell you mine. Okay, so I said to her, I'm sorry, but I've never had one. Come on, she said, tell me, I'll tell you mine. You are in the guild? I said, yes. He says, well, you must have had an altered state of consciousness. And I said, I'm afraid I haven't had one. And so that's where that conversation ended. She didn't give me her own altered state of consciousness, and I never revisited it. But what I didn't say to her at that time, I could have gone into it, is that I could have said to her, quite frankly, that I'm having altered state of consciousness all the time. Ask me when I'm not having an altered state of consciousness. Okay. Because this existential experience, the world of the senses, is an altered state of consciousness. It's not true, pure consciousness. So when we have issues, tension, anxiety, panic, depression, whatever, those are different aspects of alteration of consciousness. When we are present, when we are not in our mind, that's when we have our true, pure consciousness. And so I didn't do that with her at that time, but that's what I normally say, that actually funny enough that people talk about altered state of consciousness. Those who've had a glimpse of what they describe as altered state of consciousness, they had a glimpse of the divine consciousness, the true consciousness, pure consciousness. In other words, they came face to face with the God within them. That is an altered state of consciousness. And then they come back, now they are in an altered state of consciousness, which appears to us to be normal consciousness. So I thought I should start with that story, because the whole discussion around consciousness really revolves around this issue. It's either we understand it this way or we don't. So that's a beginning. Now, when I tell my story, my background, which I must admit, I never thought about it, about where I have been to date, until I joined the guild. So the invitation to join the guild, and Louis saying, well, tell us, where did you come from? That kind of thing. And I started thinking, oh, okay, it's important. Because I'd reached a stage in my in my life where, this story, Shadrick Mazaza's story, etc., this is just a story of my mind's creation since birth. So I'd reached a stage where I never really spent too much time thinking about that. I'm more interested to wake up each day, whether I am awake, conscious, and I am aware of the truth of my being. So when I got forced to do this, I have to say this. I'm going to mention a few of this. The beginning, when I was little, when I was in primary school, junior primary school, I was a very, very religious little child. My parents were Christians, so I was born in a Christian family. I was very religious. I remember that in my junior school, after school, I would come home and gather my little cousins and everyone else and read the Bible to them. I would lead them in song, So I was very quiet, studious, religious. Everyone in the village, the little village there, including my parents, said, this child is going to be either a teacher or a priest. So I I took that in. Everyone talked about me being a priest or a teacher. It wasn't until I went to high school that the teachers there looked at the way I was performing and said, no, this child is you are going to be a doctor, And so the doctor thing came in high school. But before that, it was teacher and priest. And then I went to do my first degree in physics and biology, where I had to take, obviously, to do physics, you must do mathematics. To do biology, you must do chemistry. So I took 4 science subjects, and I wasn't allowed to do a social science. But there was this professor of philosophy the first week when we got there, who was giving talks to try and get customers for his department. And I remember sitting there, and he was talking about life, human behavior, and all of that. And I was mesmerized at how he knew all this stuff. Everything he said, I said, that's true. And I wanted to do philosophy. so I said to myself, I must do philosophy. But I had to take 4 science subjects. So the university didn't allow me. I tried. So I said, well, never mind. When Professor Hannings, I still remember him, Professor Hannings was teaching his philosophy, and I wasn't in my class, I would sneak in and sit at the back and enjoy his lectures. I couldn't do that for very long, obviously. Things got busy, so I left it. But in my mind, until I finished my degree, I said to myself, one day I must study philosophy so I can understand life like that Professor Hanning. I went, after graduating with that first degree, I went to medical school, finished training as a doctor. During that time, I still had in my mind, because philosophy wasn't really dealt with in medical school. So, okay, one day I must study philosophy. Psychiatry interested me because it was about human behavior. So I was fascinated by psychiatry, mainly just looking at human behavior and the variations of it, from depression to anxiety to schizophrenia to mania. I was mesmerized by all of this. So I said, okay, I must study philosophy to understand it. So I graduated in medical school, came back to Cape Town, South Africa here, started continuing specialization in internal medicine. And then during that time, I stumbled upon a school of practical philosophy. I went there expecting to study the philosophy that Hannings was talking about. But when I got there, for the first time, I never knew about spirituality. I didn't even know that there were Eastern philosophies until I go to that school that day. And the first thing that they asked us to do was, come to rest and, connect with your senses. And I was going, whoa, what's going on here? I almost walked out because, I was disoriented. That's not what I was looking for. But I stayed to the end of the first lecture, and with the intention of never coming back. I went and reflected, and I said, okay, let me go back and find out a little bit more about that weird school. So I went back. To cut a long story short, I stayed in the school for almost 9 to 10 years. I was a student first in foundation school, because what I discovered was the school itself was like an initiation school. They were combining Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, mainly Vedantic philosophy in India, but also including Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt, obviously Western philosophies, and the Taoist philosophies of China. And I found that absolutely fascinating. Particularly, the emphasis was to understand who we truly are. That's what the school was all about. That who we think we are is not who we are. Who we are is the essence behind who we think we are. There's only one divine mind. That's what the school said. And we human beings, we think we have a mind. We don't have a mind. We have a brain. There's only one divine mind that all human beings share. And the one that's created by the mind that we use in everyday, that's what we call my mind. It's not your mind. It's what your brain shrinks the divine mind into. It's a restriction of who you truly are. You are vast and, eternal, etc. And I found that very useful. I found it changed my practice, my patients. By then I was in practice, and I was engaging with my patients as deeply as I could, because most of the issues they were bringing were mainly stress, tension, in other words, existential stuff. And understanding this, I found, was helping my patients more than all the other stuff that I was doing with them. So my practice changed. And then I continued. Obviously, I became obsessed with wisdom, because that's what the school, it was actually a school of wisdom in a sense. And so the task was for us to actually continue to deepen our wisdom. And deepening is not even describing it, because at the core of our being, we are wisdom. Our wisdom is covered up by all the stuff that our personal minds gets up to. So developing wisdom is a matter of sort of removing all the stuff that our little minds create that cover up the wisdom. And I became obsessed with that, that I'm going to spend now the rest of my life. I'd left the school, but I was determined that I'm going to continue deepening this understanding and sharing it with my patients. At that time, it was obviously my patients. And 4 questions that really fascinated me, that I came across during all of that time, is that the wise, the universal teachers always say that wisdom is the number 1 thing you should be pursuing. And you cannot become wise unless you ponder these fundamental questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? What's this freaking universe? And what's my place in it? Okay. And I became obsessed. I said, right. And the first question is the most important. The rest are subsidiary or secondary questions. It's who you are. It's self-knowledge. You must know who you truly are as opposed to who you think you are. And I just became obsessed that, I went reading more, all the, sort of traditions. By that time, I'd come to realize, as a matter of fact, that you can't have a whole picture of who we are unless you address all the other ologies that human beings have created to answer the question of what this is. Science is nothing other than different ologies trying to shed light on what life is and what we are. So, and then I came to the realization that after I left the School of Philosophy, that I am going to try not only to learn about wisdom the way it's taught by philosophers and sages of, sages of wisdom, spiritual wisdom, but also study the sciences, their contribution to this understanding. And so I wanted to integrate science and philosophy. I had the science, obviously. Now I must bring the two together in some form. I didn't even know that some people had been doing this before, but I thought, there's no one who's been a physician like me who's done philosophy like I have done. Obviously, I was a little deluded. There are doctors who've done this. So off I went. And then I was invited to become a director in one of the healthcare companies in South Africa. So I left my practice to become a director of their healthcare division. And they sent me, after a year of this, they realized we got a doctor, not a leader in any way or a manager. So they sent me to the business school, where I am now, to go and study executive leadership. When I got there, I found that the whole course, there were 5 modules. The first module was about, I remember it saying that leadership begins with yourself. You need to know yourself before you can actually develop any kind of leadership. I was very excited. I said, these people know about the philosophy I've been learning, But when we started the course, I was disappointed, because what they know about who you should know yourself, it was all about the ego self. Know your strengths and weaknesses and what you are like, your emotions and this. And I was disappointed. So I finished the course, I graduated. In my mind, I said, these business schools like this one, they need to learn proper knowledge, self-knowledge, the essence of our being, not just learning our existential self. So I went back to corporate. I resigned after a few weeks. I didn't like corporate that before I went to study, but I liked it even less afterwards because all the egos and this, that, and the other, I just found it less appealing. And I decided that I am going to find a way of combining what I have learned as a physician, particularly the mind-body connection, and what I've learned in the business school about management and leadership development, because I think that these two speak to each other. And I started calling it personal transformation now in my head. Personal transformation to me then was waking up to the truth of your being, finding who you really are. That was personal transformation. And I knew that was good for health and well-being. And I was now convinced that it is also the basis for leadership development, because you cannot actually change someone to lead in a given way unless you do that at a deeper level. You can't just do this superficially. Behavior comes from deep within us. And for us to be able to change our behavior outward, you have to change the inside. The way you look at the world is where you should be doing the changing. And I thought, well, spirituality is about that. And so I remember I left sort of my work saying, well, I will do something. I didn't know what it was, but I'll combine these two. I didn't know whether I could do that in a medical practice or I should start some other practice and combine. I just didn't know. But I knew that I want to be able to sit in one sitting, be able to help my patients with their medical and health issues, and also be able at the same time to be able to deal with their existential issues, particularly stress, and all the things that actually stand in the way of our progress when we are not at our maximum production. A few weeks later, I got a call from one of the things that I said to myself is, if for me to be able to do this, I must learn to be able to communicate this. Now I was already in a mode of, this requires transformative conversations, I said to myself. And so I must learn how to do this as an academic. While I was thinking like that, I got a call from one of the professors at the business school where I just said, well, Shadrick, there's a new post which is coming up later in the year. We thought that you might be perfect for this. I said, what is it about? I said, well, there's a course in healthcare management. We are looking for an academic to teach there, but also to put together a program of mentorship and coaching for the executives, senior executives in the Department of Health in South Africa, in all the 9 provinces. I said, whoa, that's an opportunity now to go and do what I've been talking about. That's what personal transformation looks like. And that's how I ended up at the business school. But I got there with an agenda. The agenda was, I'm going to start to change the course so that the foundation of it is going to be what I call personal transformation, self-knowledge, understanding who we really are, etc. I didn't know how I was going to do it. So at the beginning, all I did was, I remember first time when I started, I put on the board there to students, MBA students it was at that time, consciousness and personal transformation for the life of business and the business of life. That on its own attracted conversation with those MBA students. What are you talking about? What is consciousness? Great, let's talk about consciousness. And and so I explained to them that, as a matter of fact, consciousness is all everything that there is in existence is all consciousness. Consciousness is the basis and the foundation of everything you see, including those you don't see. And so your true nature, all of us, our true nature is that one consciousness, infinite consciousness. That's what you need to know and understand, I say to them. And then explain how that obviously impacted on behavior, management, and leadership. And so that's what I did. At the beginning, in my mind, as I said earlier on, this meant I must teach these folks spirituality, literally. So I was by that time a facilitator of meditation, which I learned at the school. And so at first I was reading a little bit of philosophers' sayings about who we are. And I introduced short meditations with a class. We would start at the beginning with a short meditation, 3-5 minutes. We would have a class. When it was time to have a break for coffee, we would have a short meditation before going. And when they came back, another short meditation. I'm telling you all this because that really upset quite a lot of students. They didn't want to be doing this. Including other academics who heard that I was doing this, So there was a lot of resistance from some members of faculty at the business school. But I changed as I went along and settled on one way of doing it. And the way I decided to do this is to define consciousness and personal transformation in a way that makes sense in that academic institution. And what I found useful is the work of Uspensky and Gurdjieff. Some of you are familiar with it. Harry Benjamin wrote a book, Basic Self-Knowledge or something like that. And in it, there was a little sort of equation to say that the task for us human beings is actually to raise our wisdom in any given situation. And there was this saying which said that our level of knowledge plus our level of being equals level of understanding, which is wisdom. So I would say to the students that you are here for whatever time it is, you're going to be given accounting and finance and strategy and all of that. Your level of knowledge, which is really external knowledge, is going to rise. But that's not going to get you to raise your level of understanding. To do that, you need to raise your level of being, which is also your level of consciousness. And personal transformation is raising your level of being so that a combination of your knowledge, external knowledge, by the way, your level of being is the inner knowledge, which is wisdom in its own, and it raises your understanding, it raises your wisdom. So I then cultivated all my conversations afterwards around this. That's what we're doing. And then I'll describe the two levels. There's only one level, but we operate as the essence and the existence, but there's only one essence. I will use that and talk about this course is about raising your level of consciousness, which raises your level of wisdom. So that's what I did in the business school. So up until now, when I say consciousness and personal transformation, it's not so much conversations on spirituality. It's understanding both your existence as well as your essence. Essence is where you're doing your spiritual understanding, but you also need to understand this body and in this existence. So there's essence and there's existence. Now, to understand both of those things, you need two disciplines coming together. We learn our essence from the philosophers and sages of spiritual wisdom and all the others. And then we need to learn from the great minds in science, neuroscience and others, to understand our physical bodies and everything else in this existence. And so at the business school, that's what I do. We do both of those. I speak to and fro between those two. Obviously, a lot of focus is on the great minds like, Aristotle and Plato, Plotinus, and so on, and also the ancient Hermetic philosophies, and then also the great minds in science, because some of those great minds, they themselves were also spiritual. And those are a gem because they combine that, from Einstein to a whole lot of others. And so we take from all of those and be able to understand, to increase our understanding of our relationship with the divine, and knowing that at the core of our being, all of us are that one divine. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how I've put together the teaching at the business school. Before I proceed, let me just mention one thing, because it grew out of this. While I was doing all of that, in 2014, I came across an article in a newspaper talking about Agenda 2063. I had never heard of it before. I Googled it and found that Agenda 2063 was a strategy that the African Union had put together for the development and integration of the continent for the next 50 years. And I was excited about it because it was a very, very ambitious plan. It is, I should say. But I said to myself that one of the challenges, the biggest challenge for this, is going to be trying to integrate 54 countries on the African continent. All of them very different in their levels of development, different religions, different all sorts of things. And to get those individuals or to get those people to work together is going to be a big challenge. And then I said to myself, well, the answer to this is going to be exactly what I am doing at the business school. Because personal transformation, in its another way of looking at it, is actually transforming individuals from their ego selves, from their thought-generated ego selves, to their true essence. At the level of the ego, there is diversity and differences. At the level of essence, there is only one soul. Like I learned in the school of philosophy, we used to say, it's about the true self, the one self, the self of all. At the level of essence, there's no separation. So I say that if we can get more and more Africans to actually transform from their egocentric worldview of looking at themselves as a little tribe born in this little country, etc., to understanding that, okay, that is useful. But as a matter of fact, our true nature as Africans is transcend all those differences. So I was convinced that I need to start an organization which is going to engage in conversations among Africans on the continent to actually wake up to the truth of our being. Because once you do that and you understand that all these differences in different countries, these are superficial things. As human beings, we have one thing in common. The soul and essence is one. And if more and more people do this, it will make it a lot easier. So I formed the African Consciousness Institute, which I described as it's about the growing up, or the waking up, the showing up, and the speaking up we require to co-create the Africa we desire. There I was talking about 3 transformations that are needed for that to happen. The first is personal transformation, the one I'm talking about now. Self-knowledge, knowing who we truly are, etc. That is going to enable us to manage the second transformation, which is interpersonal transformation. Relationships with others become easier when you can see the other person is actually you in a different guise. as opposed to someone completely different. And as someone put it very nicely, he says, when I learned this, when I woke up to this thing, each time I'm looking around, everyone is wearing my face. Okay. Everyone is wearing my face. They are me. Everyone is me. In the same way that Schopenhauer, the philosopher, said that you become your true self to the degree that you make everyone else yourself. So I say to myself, this is what we need. And that's why I formed the Institute mainly to do that, to in some way help with the agenda of the African Union. You know, I should finish this by looking at the two things I mentioned. That there are two things, and I'm convinced that there are two things that if, you know, every human being, if they can get to know the truth of their being, who they truly are as opposed to who they think they are, it will make a hell of a difference in their life. Because when you know who you truly are, you know that you and every other human being are that one self. And therefore, the problems of relationships, which we are seeing a lot of now, people retreating into their little cocoons, us and them and this little tribe or this little country, all of those things would become less of an issue with that knowledge. And then the other is, as I said, understanding where experience comes from. And this has been known for a while, by the way. I mean, it was far back, there was a German physician, philosopher, who had done studies, I think it was in the 1800s, where he showed that our experience as human beings, it appears as if it's coming from outside of us. All experience is created by us, in our mind, and projected outside. And then we experience it as if it's coming from those people. I'll give an example. For instance, you know, if I have a disagreement with my wife, say I had a disagreement with my wife in this morning and I'm all upset because she has said things or done things that I didn't like, and the whole day I've been unhappy, stressed because of it. Okay, and it appears as if the stress is coming from my wife. It is not. It can't be. Because if I am at a business school, my wife is at home, and I am feeling all stressed, there's no way that my wife can send stress to me at the business school. In fact, the way it works is this. While I'm busy at the business school with other things, I'm not thinking about the argument, I'm not stressed until I start thinking about the incident. Then I start being stressed. I stress myself with my thinking. And so the understanding now, there is no doubt whatsoever that all our experiences are inside out. We create them inside and project them to the outside. So when we ask questions, when we are having issues with our feelings and our experience of life, normally we are looking at changing the situation, people, and events for us to feel better or feel different. And we fail all the time because our experience is not coming from those people. I want to share with you one person who, someone called Sid Banks, who articulated this even more than most others. Sid Banks was had a kind of a moment of enlightenment back in 1973. Okay, enlightenment. He was a welder with very little education, and he was having a hard time in life. There were problems between him and his wife. He was stressed all the time. He tried all sorts of therapies, and it didn't seem to work. One day he heard about some psychologist who was coming to his hometown, And he said to his wife, let's go and listen to this. Maybe it will help with our marriage and our stress. So he went. On that first day, during the break, he met a young psychologist, apparently, with his wife. And that psychologist, as they were talking, this bank says to the psychologist, says, you know, what my problem is that, you know, I am stressed. Okay. I am very stressed. And the psychologist says, what did you say? He says, well, I am stressed. And he says, no, you are not stressed. You just think you are stressed. And that made a whole difference to him. He kept thinking, what does he mean? I'm just thinking I'm stressed. I am stressed. And so for the next few days, his thinking shifted. He kept running in his head. Is he saying that I am just, it's my thinking that's causing me this distress? And over the next several days, it became clearer and clearer to him. Then one evening, him and his wife, they went to visit his wife's mother. And so the wife and his wife and her mother were in the kitchen, and he was sitting in the lounge, and he had a moment of enlightenment. Some of you may have heard of it, but this is the way he described it. And I like the way he did it. He says, in the fall of 1973, I had an enlightening experience and realized the existence of a world that very few people know exists. From that moment on, I walked into a world that's invisible to the naked eye. So powerful was my experience that all negative feelings and sadness that had plagued me for 42 years vanished like mist in the morning sun. This was the day I realized all my sadness and negative feelings were all created from my own thinking. I had freed myself from all my past negative experiences. At that moment, I knew deep in my heart that if anyone could realize for a fact that we live in a world of thought, they too would find the happiness that they were searching for. What I found that day was so simple yet so powerful, it boggles the mind. Right here and then I knew that this was the missing link and the answer psychology was searching for. This answer would heal millions of people, etc., etc. That experience that he described was this. He was sitting there in the lounge, reading a newspaper, and all of a sudden, he saw bright light. If this was on the seashore, he saw bright light, and it was like a whirling of motion and light sucking him into it. Okay, and then all of a sudden he was back where he was. And then he said to his wife, he says, Barbara, I have just seen or experienced what people call God. And I've also just experienced what people call life. And now I know the connection between God and life. In other words, between the world of spirituality or spiritual life and our physical life. And then he said to him, now I'm free, he says. I am free. I have peace that I never knew existed. From now on, I'm going to spend the rest of my life sharing this experience with many people so that they understand that all stress is caused by their thinking. It's not caused by situations and conditions, it's by their thinking. So he says, I'm going to write books. Now, this is a guy with very little education. He's telling his wife, I'm going to write books, and I'm going to go travel the world to share this. And his wife and her mother sort of are saying, you know, do we know any psychiatrists around here so we can call them and deal with this? He's lost it. But as it turns out, that's exactly what happened. He wrote books. He went lectures to people, to universities, to medical schools, and the message being very simple. You need to know who you truly are, and you need to know where your experience is coming from. Your experience is created by the power that the divine has given every human being. Every human being is endowed with three qualities, principles, as it were. The principle of mind, the principle of consciousness, and the principle of thought. Mind is like the divine mind. Consciousness is the divine light. And thought is the universal divine thought that is used to create everything. The divine uses thought to create everything else. And we as human beings use thought to create our own thought-generated perceptual reality. We are creating it with our mind and then experiencing it. It appears as if it's experience coming from outside onto us, but we are creating it and experiencing it. So that's the understanding that Cinebank came across, and he just expressed it because it was known before. It wasn't new, but he expressed it in such a way that it was user-friendly to people. Which means that another thing that he himself articulated, and others, all traditions, Eastern and Western traditions, have said the same, that actually what every human being needs is a quiet mind. Every human being is looking for silence, but they don't know it. They are looking for sort of material things, promotions at work, this and that and the other. Actually, that's not what they're looking for. What they really need is a quiet mind. And that's why presence, we call it presence in our circles. Presence is to have a quiet mind. Because whenever we have a quiet mind, we are connected to the divine, we are connected to our true self, we are connected to life, and we are connected to every other human being on earth. And that's what we are looking for. And with your permission, I just want to read something that this guy said. And this is going to be in a kind of meditation. It's long, but I won't read all of it. I only read a little bit of it, just to give you a little taste of what he said. He says, you can almost see and hear the silence. And that's what you are searching for. You are searching for silence. Everybody in the universe searches for silence, whether they know it or not, because everybody in the universe is that one same superconscious state, playing the game of life. And in this game of life, we all search for ourselves. Now, that's just words saying. We all search for ourselves. When I say selves, I mean inner selves, the thing that created the life in the first place. Now, consciously, most of us are not aware of this. But if you are searching for happiness, if you are searching for tranquility, if you are searching just to have a nice, peaceful, loving, understanding life, in actual fact, you are searching for your inner self. Because from the inside, this is the only place that the truth can be found. Because inside, this true self is truth. It's a living fact. It's a state of consciousness, which is directly linked to the energy of all things, which you could call the easiness. That's what we are searching for, the easiness of all things. You find out it is a state of consciousness, which is directly linked. It has to be nothing, because to be honest, there couldn't possibly be a beginning or an end. Here he's talking about we are searching for the honest of all things. Because it wouldn't be the honest, it would be if it would be the easiness, and the easiness is what we can see. The honest is what creates the easiness. To find the easiness, you've got to go into the honest and come out from the inside with the answer to create the easiness that you want. When you find it, you find the perfect health, mental health. I'll stop there. It's long, but
I extend my appreciation to you, Shadrick, Dr. Mazaza, for taking time, not using PowerPoint, engaging us with stories, and sharing with us your pathways to conscious leadership. And I really appreciate the engagement to each and every one. And hopefully we'll see you back here on May 20th with Mary's presentation and journey of her conscious leadership journey. So with that, thank you so much. We'll sign off for now and stay well. Thank you so much again, Shadrick. Really appreciate it.